Alliance webinar on what could an ambitious circular economy strategy achieve for business. Just allowing a few more mins for people to join. But I'll kick off with a bit of an intro. So what is circular business, you might ask? Well, thankfully, today we're going to dig right into it and talk about the reality on the ground of the sometimes slightly abstract sounding circular economy. What does it really look like? What kinds of businesses are circular? How do they work? How do they make money? What sorts of skills do you need to work there? And what do we need to see from the government in the upcoming circular economy strategy to support them? So today, Green Alliance, we have just published our report on this called In the Loop, Stories of Businesses Delivering the Circular Economy. And we'll put a link to that in the chat. And it's also up on our website and social media, LinkedIn and Blue Sky, etc. So do take a look at that. But for today, thank you all so much for joining us to discuss this topic. And thank you also very much to our brilliant panel, who are very lucky to be joined by today. So I'll do brief intros. We have Tom Wright, who is a director of strategy and at PwC, who's joining the call from London, and has done some fascinating work on the economic opportunity of the circular economy and the business opportunities of that transition and what that looks like for business. Then we have Michael Cusack, who's joining us from Glasgow, Chief Sustainability Officer from Advanced Clothing Solutions, which is a really fascinating business helping large clothing brands tap into the rapidly growing rental and resale markets in fashion. And then finally, we have Radia Al-Jannah joining us from Manchester, hopefully. I think she's having a few technical issues, but hopefully she'll be back on the call in time to tell us all about being an apprentice at Suez's Manchester Renew Hub. And she has a background in design and sustainable manufacturing, and she's going to tell us what it's really like working for a circular business. So today's webinar has a pretty straightforward format. I'm going to kick us off with just a really short presentation on the report that we've launched today, looking at 5 stories of circular business already working and operating at scale in the UK and what those businesses are delivering in terms of business profitability and for society more generally. Then I'm going to hand over to Tom to talk about all things economics. They recently published a report looking at the economic modelling of the transition to a circular economy. So looking forward to hearing all about that and the kind of business opportunities in there. Then I'm going to bring in Michael to bring in the perspective of a large-scale circular business already operating at scale. And then we're going to bring in Radia to talk about what it actually is like working for a circular business and training as an apprentice there. After each of those presentations, I might ask a follow-up question or two myself before moving on to the next speaker, and then we'll move into a kind of general Q&A session. And we really love to have your questions. So please do put your questions in the Q&A function as people are talking, as you're thinking about what they're saying, and take a look at what other people are putting in there as well, because you can upvote things that you'd like to hear the answer to. So without further ado, I'll kick us off with just a really short run through of our recent report, In the Loop. So you might have seen there are a lot of government strategies coming out at the moment, including the industrial strategy this week, which was a pretty big moment, but there is more coming. So a circular economy strategy has been promised for England, and this is a really big moment for circular economy policy, and there's a real potential here for some kind of big leaps forward to be made if the strategy is really ambitious about reducing resource use. Previous analysis has shown that growing a circular economy in the UK could create 470,000 jobs by 2035, and many of those in areas with high underemployment. It could add 25 billion to UK GDP by 2035, and it could reduce UK greenhouse gas emissions by 11% by 2050. But that's all still pretty abstract. So with the report and the webinar today, we wanted to talk about what the circular economy actually looks like for businesses and workers on the ground. So in our report, we featured 10 businesses that are already operating at like a large scale within the UK and thriving because they're circular. And the five stories that emerged from the benefits that those businesses are already having on society and the economy are number one, I'll just run through them quite quickly. Number one, new market opportunities. So when one business goes circular, it often creates opportunities for multiple businesses to profit. And you can see this with large logistics providers like Advanced Clothing Solutions, who are on the call. So I'm not going to go into loads of detail because I'm sure Michael will do it better than I can. But the key thing here is that they do the logistical work that enables other existing currently linear businesses to get involved in rental and resale, which are lucrative new markets for them. Second story, delivering profits and savings for consumers. So selling refurbished products can really help businesses tap into previously value that would have been lost. So products that might have been sent to recycling instead can be refurbished and then sold at a reduced price. So consumers get the benefit of a cost reduction and the business gets the benefit of selling something again. We spoke to Screwfix for this report, who sell refurbished kind of DIY type products at typically 20% discount compared to new, and the customers love it. So that's a really good one. Third story, supporting farmers and fairer supply chains. So current supermarket standards for food are very strict on appearance of crops, and that often leads to food waste, things get thrown away, and it also places the risk of an imperfect crop on farmers. Whole crop purchasing agreements can tackle this, and they do exactly what it says. Supermarkets agree to purchase the whole crop, not just the beautiful stuff, ensuring farmers get a secure income and providing supermarkets with another source of revenue because they can use those wonky veg in ready meals, for example. And Tesco and Branston, an example of a partnership like that that we feature in the report. Number four, creating green jobs. Manufacturing and operational skills are in high demand in circular businesses, where the switch over to remanufacturing actually requires a lot of those same kind of skills in manufacturing and skilled trades. The businesses that we feature in the report are Caterpillar and JCB, who sell heavy machinery, and they both have remanufacturing hubs in the UK where they return products to kind of that as new condition for resale, and they run apprenticeships and retraining schemes to make sure that those skills are kept and also training up the next generation. And then the fifth story is benefiting local communities. So by reusing and redistributing items like toys, furniture, circular businesses can also help communities access affordable items. In the report, we spoke to Greater Manchester Renew Hub, run by Suez, who we will hopefully be speaking to later in the panel. So again, not loads of detail, but they're able to refurbish and redistribute items to local people. So for example, they work with the local council housing department to furnish social homes, and that decreases costs for the council as well as supporting local people. So circular businesses can really deliver for people, business, and of course, by reducing resource use for the planet too. So what should we see? What should be in the promised circular economy strategy for England to support this? We think the North Star of that strategy has to be a target to reduce resource use in line with the UN guidelines on sustainable levels. That's the key, but it is industry and businesses that will need to deliver a big chunk of that target. So what do we need to see to support circular businesses to become the norm? And we have three asks. First of it is reforming the tax system to reward circularity, going beyond leveling the playing field, actually rewarding circularity. So for example, VAT could be zero rated on repairs and spare parts and labour for repair and or building refurbishment. The second one is setting strong product standards that encourage reuse and repair and build consumer confidence. So that might include things like eco-design to make sure products are durable and repairable, and consumer rights standards for new business models like subscription and rental. And the third one is to invest significantly in green skills development so that we have the skills for the circular economy transition of the future. And you could do things like introduce a green skills super deduction, so a tax relief for businesses invested in green workforce training. That's a very quick run through. If you'd like to read our report, we will put the link in the chat. In fact, I think it might already be in the chat. It's up on our website and social media, as I say. Do take a look. But for now, I think that's probably enough from me. So we'd like to hear some business perspectives from the ground. So first up, I will hand over, sorry, to Tom from PwC, who leads their work with clients on creating commercial value from circular business models. And Tom, over to you.
Thank you, Heather. Um, Nice to see everyone this morning. Slightly more about where I come from with this question. I'm actually not within an out-and-out sustainability team. My day job's working with large corporates, industry groups, and investors around essentially how they can make money out of the circular economy and kind of make it successful. We decided to do this research because there seemed to be a bit of a tension between a lot of evidence in the work that we do and the interest of investors about the commercial potential of circularity, but a quite polarized debate on both sides, both sort of pro and against more circularity policies, business models, and investment. So we were trying to shine light on two questions. One was, even if we took a fairly conservative view as to what might happen with more circularity, what would be the impact on the UK economy? And the purpose of that was not to perfectly predict the future, but it was saying, even if we're conservative, even then, can we be confident about the impact on the UK economy? And secondly, at actually a micro level, at a business level, there's a lot of great work, like what Heather described on case studies about businesses showing the way with circularity. But we wanted to do a systematic comparison of all of the circular business models we could find and compare their profitability to the linear equivalents to build, hopefully, confidence that this isn't about cherry picking. This is not a fundamentally less profitable way of doing business. So I'll share the headlines of those two reports. So on the first report on the economic impact, we limited the impact to four sectors because we wanted to be conservative. We limited the impact to only changes in circularity in a country where we see it already in a European peer, and we don't even go to the leading example. We just push the UK's performance sort of to the next best real world example within Europe. And my economics colleagues who are all ex-Treasury did some very complicated analysis to figure out with an IO model what that all means. And the headline is that there's an increase in UK GDP of approximately 1%. There is an improvement in productivity of approximately 0.4%. And there's jobs growth of 170,000 or thereabouts. And I remind you again, this was us taking a very conservative view as to what the changes might be and only moving to instances of these kind of policies in place in countries near to us. Why this is happening is actually quite interesting. What typically happens when circularity increases in country is the economic activity that goes down is primary extraction and primary conversion, because that's the whole point of circularity, preventing that activity. And what goes up is the remanufacturing, the local logistics, and the sortation and the resale. And that activity inherently happens closer to the point of consumption. So in the example of a country like the UK, which doesn't have a high level of primary extraction and conversion, the economy doesn't really lose out by that economic activity going down, but it does gain from that remanufacturing, rework, resale, and reprocessing activity. So that's one of the fundamental reasons why it works. The second reason why the analysis shows the UK is well suited is, to some extent, a shift to a circular economy is switching a product to more of a service, because you have to move the product around after reuse, you've got to rework it, you've got to have information flows and financial flows connected to it, you've got to design new propositions, and the UK is very good from a services perspective, so we have the capabilities. And I think the third reason that the analysis shows as to why the UK seems particularly well suited is circularity works in a lot of countries, but it tends to like scale and dense populations. And again, the UK has quite high population density overall, and also clusters of density within the UK. So the conservative analysis shows a positive story, and the fundamentals of the UK are a very good match. So macroeconomics, tick. Switching to the microeconomics of, well, how does this play out at a business level? What we did was spoke to every single industry team within PwC, told them what a circular business model was, and said, based on your industry experience over the last 10 years, gives all the examples you know of circular business models. Don't pick the good ones, bad ones, or anything, just all the examples you can tell us about. So this was from people working within these industries. We then collected the performance data on all of those businesses and compared it to equivalent linear businesses, so same sector, same country, um, and same level of activities in those sectors. We did that across, I think, in the end, 20 to 30 standalone businesses, which we found. And the results, again, were very interesting. What they showed was circular business models are no less profitable than their linear equivalents. It also showed that, if anything, they tend to grow faster, but also not surprisingly, like linear business models, there is a huge range in performance of these businesses. It is not inevitable that because a business is circular, it is necessarily more profitable, nor that it will grow faster. But the analysis does show that they are not fundamentally less profitable business models, which I think is really encouraging, given that they are at a fairly young stage at the moment in the UK. And this analysis was conducted before any major policy support. So stepping back from these two bits of work, you have both a strong conservative, even macroeconomic case, and we think a very strong microeconomic case. But the tension here, we think, is why do we see such a polarized debate, and why do we see that such resistance to pushing these models more, given the analysis shows both the positive business and economic impacts? I've got some fairly strong views around this, but maybe it's a topic which we could pick up as part of the conversation, Heather.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks so much, Tom. That's really, really interesting. And I've put the link to PwC's report on the macroeconomics of the transition in the chat in case anyone wants to have a little look. I was just going to ask a quick follow-up question to you, Tom, before we move on to Michael. I wonder if there are any sectors that you feel are really leading the way with this, or conversely, any sectors where there might be more of a challenge. You kind of talked about like there's a range, and some businesses do well and some don't. Is there a sectoral element to that, or is it more about how that business is set up and run?
It's the latter. Um, what would be really interesting to hear from Michael around this as well. What's driving performance and success much more is businesses figuring out how circular practices essentially solve a challenge within their business, either in terms of going after new customers, saving costs, building resilience, or even if they themselves are not circular, they're a key enabler of supply chains, which I know you alluded to in your previous talk. So I think that the sector lens itself distracts from the more important question of how can circular business practices fit with the specific business under consideration.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. And yeah, we can come back to some of that wider kind of discussion and debate maybe in the Q&A. But yeah, fascinating to hear the perspective from PwC of someone who's kind of talking to businesses who are dealing with these challenges on a daily basis. Speaking of which, I'd like to now hand over to Michael, Chief Sustainability Officer, Advanced Clothing Solutions, who does spend his days on the ground of a circular business, seeking to change the way the fashion industry works. So, Michael, over to you.
Greetings from Glasgow. Uh, my name's Michael Cusack. I drive sustainability at a company called ACS. We were born into the circular economy around about 25 years ago. And it was through the hire of Highlandwear kilts. We consider ourselves the infrastructure for the circular fashion economy. And what I mean by that is we provide circular services. So we've developed this infrastructure that involves things like a triage. So the item being received, being inspected, it can be digitized, identified through things like some barcodes, RFID, and we're now transitioning to digital product passports. And from that perspective, from that area, it then moves into sanitisation. of the garments, so killing off bacteria, pathogens, deodorizing the garments through a sustainable solution using ozone gas, naturally occurring ozone gas. If it requires stains to be removed, we've got a series of dry cleaning, wet cleaning, laundry. And in laundry, by the way, it's quite unusual because what we do there is we use ozonated water, so fizzy water. We ozone gas in it to help with the process to reduce the amount of water consumption, mechanical action, and consumption of water. So from removal of stains, we then finish the garment. We take the creases out of it. We use dedicated equipment designed around different garments, like shirts. We've got a special press, a mannequin that blows hot air through it. We've got steam tunnels and we've got various bucks and presses as well. We also repair garments. We've got an army of seamstresses who are absolutely fantastic, highly skilled individuals that can actually remanufacture garments, know how garments are designed, and do multiple different repairs in high volumes. From this area, we also we then protect the garments, and we used to use polythene, which is a hydrocarbon product. We've now moved to tree sap. From tree sap, it's a regenerative solution. The only reason I share that with you, it's highly sustainable. It's actually capturing carbon dioxide rather than emitting carbon dioxide. From that area, we then put the garments into storage, where when an order comes in, they can be picked, packed, and dispatched anywhere in the British Isles. So that's the sort of infrastructure that we have. It's a purpose-built facility. The picking and packing is actually automated. We have horizontal movement. It's tapped into our enterprise system. So, it reduces a lot of the manual handling. Now, all this infrastructure is designed to support circular business models. And those circular business models are things like clothing rental. So clothing rental, as I mentioned earlier, we did Highland wear, we're into other forms of men's formal, we do ladies wear, full range, children's wear, babies wear. Think of babies wear. A child grows so quickly, a baby grows so quickly. So you think of the amount of garments that a baby actually uses and unfortunately owns. So what we are trying to do is we provide these solutions. We also have resale. So garments that you no longer wish, that you maybe want, that people want to sell on, or companies want to sell, end of stock, etc. We resell them, and we've got a fantastic process dedicated to do that. We also deal with returns. So if you think about individuals, companies who have got items that have been returned back from consumers, we can take them in by the trailer load and process them on behalf of companies, and we do it very efficiently, very effectively, very sustainably, at a reasonable cost. On top of that, we also look at refurbishment and rework of garments. So we've got fantastic relationships with companies like, for example, the North Face or Nudie Jeans. And what we do is items that are sent back with customers, we repair them, clean them, sanitize them, and get ready for them to be resold rather than end up in landfill or incinerated. So we look at that as well. Nudie Jeans give jeans for life. So you've got a lifetime guarantee. On top of that, we also look at the repurposing of garments and remodeling of garments, remaking of garments, upcycling of garments. So what we're trying to say is if we can no longer use that item for its original purpose, we look at other purposes, and they can range from making rucksacks, tote bags, blankets, textile bricks, dog beds. So there's numerous, or it could be shredded and used in upholstery or as insulation in homes. So we've got a full range of what we can do in terms of these different types of circular business models. And what we are trying to do is maximize the use and expand the lifespan of these textile products. And it can only help the it can only help the planet and the communities that we operate in by doing this. Just to give you an idea, but it's not just about sustainability, but we have reduced our emissions by nearly 60% since we started measuring it back in 2019. We've reduced nearly 70% of our water consumption. We're reducing our energy consumption. We've moved to 100% renewables, so it's all scope 3. We've also embracing social impact of our business as well. We're a B Corp and very proud of it. And we look at various social impact programs. For example, about 90% of our workforce are either time served modern apprentices or working towards their modern apprenticeship. We provide these modern apprenticeships in-house. They're developed around the national standards, but they are circular and they are green jobs. The other thing as well is we had a lot of big impact in our organisation with Brexit. We lost a lot of staff. And what we chose to do was actually to focus in on creative ways of attracting people to our business and helping us grow. And what we did is we focused in on those most disadvantaged in the local communities, people with disabilities, people from the refugee community, people from long-term care and ex-offenders. And what we do is we bring them into our organisation, help to develop them and give them meaningful jobs. Other things I'll
Amazing.
throw in, we're a real living wage provider, living hours, transitioning to a living pension. We're a disability confident leader. I'm currently just trying to work out whether or not I'm working with Scottish Government to determine whether or not we're a supported business, because that opens up in terms of I've got big plans for the circular economy in terms of the public sector. Uh,
Great.
oh,
Thanks so much, Michael. Sorry to
okay.
interrupt you there, but this is all fascinating stuff. But yeah, I think we might need to just move on to the next speaker and come back to some of the stuff in the Q&A. And I've got questions that I want to ask you for the Q&A discussion as well about policy and what we need to see from government. So we'll definitely come back to some of this stuff. But thank you so much for explaining what ACS does and all of the amazing things that you're pushing through on the kind of social side as well as the environmental side. It's really great to hear. But I'd like to now hand over to Radia, who hopefully has been able to join the call from Manchester. She's an apprentice at, oh yeah, great, I can see you. Apprentice at Suez's Manchester Renew Hub. So it would be great to hear about what it's like genuinely working for a circular business and using your skills for the circular economy. So Radia, I'll pass over to you.
Perfect. So, hi everyone. I'm Radia. I'm an apprentice at the Renew Hub, obviously with Recycling and Recovery UK. Now, the Renew Hub is a very special circular model, but I'll just talk about what I do on a day-to-day, otherwise we will be here all day. So, as part of the Suez Apprenticeship Programme, my role as a furniture restorer is incredibly varied. It's very creative in nature, but what I love the most about it is that sustainability is at the forefront of everything that we do. Day to day, my job involves discovering the potential in the sea of donated items that we receive, uncovering value in certain things that others may have written off. Many of the pieces that we receive are high quality in themselves. They just require a bit of TLC, whether that be through sanding, staining, lacquering, just to restore it back to its former glory. Other pieces are more common, but that's when we really get to transform them through upcycling and adding our own creative touch. We often do that through following design trends. So I come from a design background, so I'll use certain skills such as sketching and obviously predicting certain kind of patterns that come in. Leopard print is very popular at this time of year, and I can say I'm very for it. But my personal favourite part of the apprenticeship is learning how to upholster. I really enjoy it because it gives us experience in a traditional and one would argue dying craft and directly apply those skills into real life commission projects that we have. So, and those really impact our local community groups in a positive way. To name a few, we worked with a social enterprise called Northern Lily, and what they do is they grow local vegetables in their fields and give it directly back to the community due to the cost of living crisis, as well as hold workshops surrounding mental health and how horticulture can impact that in a positive way. Another amazing project was with a group called Wild and Art, where we were able to donate pre-loved instruments, and they took those instruments and they were able to create art installations across Greater Manchester. And I think it was also to commemorate the Oasis reunion tour, if I'm not mistaken. And lastly, one which is quite close to my heart is the Eid Cycle project, where we were able to donate bikes to help Muslim girls and women who, like myself, were not given the chance to be able to learn how to ride. So through that kind of work, we were able to help them develop the confidence to do that. And that kind of impact is what makes this work so special and just shows how an ambitious circular strategy can do much more than reduce waste. It proves that sustainability can be practical, creative, and socially powerful all at the same time.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Radia. That sounds fascinating. I wonder if I could come to you with a quick follow-up question, just
Question.
to ask, great, just to ask what kind of drew you to apply for this apprenticeship in particular, and what do you think other businesses could do to appeal to more young people to come into the sector?
So for me personally, like I said, I came from a design background. But one thing I really appreciated about the kind of work that I did was the practical element of it. So with university, we're kind of used to just doing everything behind a screen, very theoretical based. But I really enjoyed making things with my hands. So I think I must have gone on a deep dive on LinkedIn, and suddenly I found a place where I'd be woodworking in a workshop in house, and I'd be learning how to upholster and all these amazing things. And I thought this is right up my alley. However, in terms of businesses, I'd say utilize the platforms that young people use. TikTok is such a big, ever growing platform. And I'll be honest, I get a lot of my information from there, especially when it comes to green skills. When I look up certain techniques and just jobs, for example, I'd say for businesses to be able to really utilize that and grab young people's attentions, because more often than not, it's just awareness.
Yeah, thank you. That's really interesting and a really good point about like being in the places where the young people are already looking for information. And if that's not in fact LinkedIn, as some
Yeah.
of the older people may think it is, then yeah, being in those right places, that makes a lot of sense. Um, Fantastic. So I think we can now move into a kind of more general discussion between the panelists, and looking forward to everyone putting their questions in the Q&A box. But I thought I would kick us off with just a kind of general question to the whole panel, and put your hand up to come in first, or come off mic to come in first. Um, but to kind of ask the title question of the webinar. So, what could an ambitious circular economy strategy achieve for business? So, what would good look like? How would things be different for business if they really produce an ambitious, strong circular economy strategy? So, you could answer in terms of like the policy that you would like to see in that strategy, or you can answer in terms of what the business environment would look like if that was a really successful strategy, or what the training opportunities might look like. Anyone want to come in on that?
Could I maybe just jump in?
Yeah.
For us, it's all about growth, and it's about organic growth, and it's about growth with purpose. So what we'd be doing is creating meaningful jobs, and what we'd be looking at is astronomical growth. From that, we've already done a lot of calculations. There's a lot of research in place on it, and we think that we can create employment for in areas throughout the country that gives people a purposeful role. It would give them a role around, they would have at least the living wage, they'd be getting development and other additional support. So we'd create employment. The other thing as well is we'd be a leader in the world because everybody's aspiring to do this. I think we're very close to getting it done. I think there's some really centres, expertise throughout the country, not just in the fashion industry, but in other industries as well. I don't look at the waste from the linear the linear organisations that exist at the moment. I see it as raw material ready to be used, mountains of raw material. I think it's a fantastic opportunity. I think if we get in early enough, we can get the growth, we can get the economies of scale, we can invest in technologies and be a world leader in this. I also think the softening of Brexit is going to have a big impact, and we'll have greater access to the European market and support them in the circular economy as well. I just see it as fantastic opportunity, not just for a company like us, but for the whole of the country. to get behind. And the quicker we do this, the better, because a lot of hesitation and things like policy, etc. Let's get in there. Let's get tax incentives in place. Let's get the policies in place, and let's unleash these organisations to do what they're best at.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. That's really, yeah, inspiring to hear you say that. And I agree because, the faster we get on with this, the better. I mean, the other nations within the UK are in fact slightly ahead, or more than slightly ahead of where England is, because this will be a circular economy strategy for England. But Scotland is, slightly further ahead. They've got their circular economy bill, circular economy strategy. Wales has got their own strategy, Northern Ireland are consulting on having a target to reduce material use. So, the sooner the better that England cracks on and gets ahead with this stuff, the better, definitely. Tom, did you want to come in on this one?
I think Michael put it really well. The bits I'd add, it's a tough one to say. I think the debate around this topic needs to get more sophisticated, and that needs to be reflected in the policy as well. I don't think anyone on this call would disagree about the huge growth potential here, and our conservative analysis of others kind of backs this up. But it's not inevitable, nor is it simple. These are multiple changes to multiple stages on multiple supply chains. It is more or less feasible right now in certain sectors than it is in others. That will change over time, but it isn't a case of everything everywhere right now. And it's also the case that there's some very real, effectively and large non-sustainability considerations which need to have a much, I think, more prominent voice around this. Getting to us more circular business practices is much more about supply chain and commercial and information flows as it is about sustainability. Like that's the way you measure it and what we're trying to achieve. The hard yards and why you need people like Michael and others involved in these sectors is these are really complicated supply chain and commercial questions with some tough trade-offs to face into, and you need that expertise in the room much more. So I think number one, a more nuanced and pragmatic conversation around this and accepting that this isn't a black and white question. I think number two is real engagement with industry on those topics, and industry likewise with policymakers. That will flesh out some of these nuances, but it will also build a sense of common endeavor here. I think there is, deservedly or not, some tensions in certain places that people are pushing things too hard or holding back too much, when actually I think there's a lot more common ground here. And if there was this real deep engagement with industry, that would, I think, really help drive this. And that is, I think, happening a lot in the UK at the moment, and I'd encourage that to continue. And thirdly, coming out of that, and this is particularly thinking about unlocking private capital, is clarity and certainty. Because the amount of, I do a lot of commercial due diligence as well, the amount of diligence processes we do on recyclers and refurbishers, and the conclusion, unfortunately, is often no one is doubting that over a 10-year period of the direction of travel around more models like businesses like Michael's, more recycling, more reuse, all the great economic benefits, but they're navigating too much short-term uncertainty to meet their investment profile. So it's not easy, but giving them that clarity and not changing things will be a big unlock for that private capital to step in and basically bring in that expertise and money to do a lot of the work on effectively for the policymakers and the governments and others trying to achieve these goals.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Tom. That's really interesting. I'm always fascinated when someone says on a webinar, I've got really strong opinions about something. It was going to be my follow-up question to you, was going to ask what your really strong opinions were about why you think this debate is so polarized. That I feel like you've covered that off there nicely. So thank you. That's really interesting. Radia, if you have any thoughts on the kind of what would the good vision look like from the strategy, feel free to come in on those.
I think from a graduate perspective, I have quite a shorter answer, but For us, sustainability, everyone's heard about it. When it comes to circular economy, not everyone knows what it fully is, but a full general idea. In terms of what we do here, we are moving waste up the hierarchy from recycle to reuse.
Mm.
But the thing I could say is just hope that in the long run that all of this is worthwhile. And yes, there are debates that it is worth it, it isn't worth it. But from where I'm standing, yes, it may take 50 odd years, maybe in the long run, but small steps lead to big effects. So at the end of the day, I suppose it is worth it.
Nice. That's a really hopeful message. Small steps lead to big effects. Very true. And we have a question actually from the Q&A for you. If I can keep you. Oh, hang on, I've lost it. No, I've got it back. Ready. Yeah. So Libby asks, what sorts of things do apprentices at SUS tend to go on to do? And what do you think your next step will be after the apprenticeship? Will you stay in the circular economy?
Oh, that's a very big question. I get that quite a lot, actually. So in terms of the apprenticeship program, I'd say SUS is really good in the sense that they will try and place you within their organization, even if it means that you're not doing the traditional job that you came here for. For me, as I came from a design background, I think I will still push to have that regardless of what I do. But the intention is to stay here and continue the good fight that we're doing here and just take one piece on at a time. So that is the dream, fingers crossed.
Nice. Yeah, it's a good dream. Good. Glad to hear it. And yeah, I hope it goes really well. So other questions we have from chat. Gosh, there's quite a few. Let me just have a look. There's one here for Tom from Giovanni. What are the policy measures you think the UK government should implement to kick off the circular economy strategy in the short term? What sectors will be most impacted by them? If you want to answer an aspect of that, that's absolutely fine. If others want to come in on that, what we think the policy measures are, we think the UK government to kick off the circular economy strategy. I have views, but I'll open it out to the panel first to come in on anything they want to add.
My overlords at PwC will shout at me if I say anything about policy, and this is going to sound like a politician's answer, but it's not. It's really complicated. So anything sort of rushed and sounding like it's sort of trying to do everything within the next 2 to 3 years in every single sector, I'd be nervous about. So I think there's a sense of prioritizing and phasing is really important here. Secondly, I'm not sure I know what a circular economy is. It is because it inherent there's 1,001, 1,000,001 different configurations of value chains, business models associated with reusing things and recycling things. And so just to talk about it being like an abstract thing over there, I think is part of the challenge here. So I think if in the policy, what I think would be useful would be not saying this is this, like it'll be badge cost as a circular economy policy, but kind of getting into specifics about we're trying to drive. I think Regia put it well, like more like design work and more growth in business models that are adding value to things, and getting quite specific about changes in the real economy, because a circular economy, like it is just an umbrella term for a whole bunch of practices, and even if it was something, it doesn't mean anything, I don't think, to anyone really, or to the extent it does mean something, it means 101 different things to 101 different people. So I get it from a comms point of view, it's got to be in the headline, but I think getting as specific as possible about supply chains, business models, employment opportunities, getting into these nuts and bolts is just, it is so important.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And there's actually potentially a follow-up question that I can see in the chat to you, Tom. So I'm just going to put it to you now and then come to Michael and Radia on the rest of the question. But there's a question here about what aspects of the circular economy are your clients/investors most excited about, Tom, in kind of the context of that narrative, changing the narrative, making it relevant to people. What aspects of the circular economy are your clients/investors most excited about? If you can tell us.
Well, if I'm honest, I get a lot of questions of how do I think about dividing this up and even get my head around it? Because, they're to some extent suffering from as well what the rest of us are, of it's just this amorphous term that's often thrown around. So that a lot of them don't know exactly where, and that's what they want help with. I think the characteristics of the circular economy that they really like, and some of this is for sustainability reasons, but a lot of it is because they make darn good money out of it, is number one, any business practice which requires people to come back into your website or to your business to return something and interact with you again, that solves a massive challenge for a lot of businesses driving footfall and getting people back. So they really like that. They really like the fact that these businesses tend to have much stickier customers because they're giving stuff back, they're owning the same thing, and investors absolutely love the certainty of customer bases. They also really like the fact that the economics of circular business models tend to get better and better as they get bigger and bigger. So they like that dynamic within them as well. They like the fact that it reduces variability in the cost of input materials, which in the current environment is getting much more important. And I think they probably see things which, if you look at this through a sustainability lens, you might not see. So it's an example which Heather and Emily and Libby often roll their eyes at. But if you take SpaceX, right, the fundamental reason why the cost of space travel has fallen is because they've figured out how to capture and reuse the rocket. Like, that is it. Space travel has got cheaper purely because of circular business practices. And if we do get to Mars in the next 10 years, it will also be because of that ability to reuse the rocket. And it's a slightly extreme example, but I just think and investors sort of see the world in those terms, kind of cost savings and facilitations of business practices. And it plays out differently in different sectors. I'm not saying that value add is the same for everyone, but they see the inherent value in this, and that's what they're trying to unlock. But they're kind of scratching at, yeah, but kind of where, which sectors, and I don't have enough policy certainty, but they get it.
Yeah, I mean that space rocket example is a funny one, but it is true. Yeah, yeah, you make a good point that the reuse of such a large and expensive component saves so much money. That suddenly, without any technology change, you'd be making something significantly cheaper. I'm gonna come to you next, Michael, and I'm gonna ask a slightly different question to the one I asked Tom, but really interested to hear kind of your perspectives on this question. If circular business models already so beneficial to businesses, if it's already working, why aren't more getting on with it? What does the forthcoming strategy need to do? What's your perspective on that?
Well, my perspective is quite simple. If you view the fashion industry and the organisations that are in it as oil tankers, they all know their destination, and their destination is selling product, and selling product as frequently in large volumes as they can. They've invested in reducing the cost of that industry. They do it through exploitive means. They exploit the environment throughout the world. They exploit people throughout the world to reduce costs and maximise profit. It's very difficult for them to see these other models because they're so focused in this linear model. So what I would say to you is we need support as a circular economy. We need support, we need infrastructure, we need legislation, and we need it now. Because the only way these organisations can change and change quick enough is through legislation. They see this as when they look at our models, rental, resale, as a cannibalisation, not complementary revenue streams, cannibalisation of their market. They do a lot of projects, and I would actually say to you, a lot of these projects are seen as CSR projects, not seen as pilots and circular models. So I'm just putting it out there right now. If you want to bring about change, if you want to change these organisations, it has to be legislated. I can't understand why we can't do it today. The models are there. The biggest issue that I have right now is economies of scale. We need the volumes. We can actually increase our capacity, increase our load by 5 times overnight. But we need to incentivise the industry. And the other thing, we're not just incentivising it for just the environment, we're doing it actually in a way to help the industry as well, because there are global changes and our companies are not changing fast enough. They're pushing back against this. Circular business models will happen. The circular economy will take off. It's already happening in Europe. There's pockets of excellence in the US as well. Are we going to fall behind, or do we want to be the leaders in this? And if we want to be the leaders in this, the government needs to legislate now. And it doesn't have to be the whole of the fashion industry. We could even just do something like workwear and uniforms to start with and learn from it and build in that. And I'm already doing work in that. And I expect, but why is it up to small companies, an SME, to be leading the way in this rather than the, larger enterprises and the government? So we're open to collaboration. We're collaborating with a lot of people, and we're looking at creative models of collaboration as well. And we expect big changes, but we need some help. We need this legislation, and we also need other things like taxation incentives as well to level the playing field, because it's very difficult to compete against fast fashion. And fast fashion, I believe, is on the increase through Temu, through Shein, through, I'm sorry to say, TikTok as well is helping to promote it. But there are goodness in TikTok. But these sort of things, we're up against it and we need the help. And it's not just for our company, but it's for the whole of UK PLC.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I agree. I mean, yeah, it's fascinating. I guess my follow-up question to you would be, are you seeing what the Scottish government is doing as like, are they taking further steps that are really supportive and helpful of that? Or do you think the England circular economy strategy can kind of learn some lessons from that? Or do you think there needs to be a kind of UK-wide something bigger that Scotland can't do on its own?
It has to be UK PLC. I'm
Mm,
I'm happy about what's happening in Scotland right now because it's bringing a focus to some of the things we're doing. And I've got an event coming up. We've got some investors, social enterprises, government organisations come together and looking at a circular business model that can be working in terms of workwear and uniforms. Just to give you a wee example for the audience, can you imagine an airline? One airline, the amount of uniforms are changed every year for the crew. I'll give
mm.
you 250,000 for an average airline items. Can you imagine if we could actually reuse that workwear? Imagine if we could reuse them as school uniforms for fifth and sixth years. So I just throw that out there. That is a real project I'm working on right now.
Amazing. Yeah, love that. We are nearly out of time. There's just 4 minutes left. There's quite an interesting question in the Q&A, which I'll just throw out there if anyone wants to come in on. And then we'll have to wrap up, I think. But this question from Nicholas. The examples in the report are inspiring, but why has the UK failed to grow cooperative or employee-owned businesses like Mondragon in the Spanish Basque Country, a world leader in building innovative trains? Could it be that our prevailing values and business model of maximizing profits for shareholders or other investors needs to be updated so that social environmental values predominate? Do we think that is an important part of the transition to a circular economy? Does anyone want to weigh in on shareholder maximization?
I think it's a very valid question. I think we've got a fantastic opportunity to re-engineer how organisations have purpose. And I think, I mean, we're looking at ways that we can expand our business through social enterprises and collaborating with existing social enterprises and also creating new social enterprises. I think it's about bringing it's great to create shareholder value. But there are other things that we should be focused in on as well. So I think these are fantastic models, and I think they're going to keep transitioning. And I think the whole thing about the circular economy draws these sort of organisations to it.
Great.
I think it's also a very good question. I think it's an and though, not an or. There is, you see the people on this call, you see our cities, you see others, there's money to be made here. And betting on good intentions by people and people changing their behaviors without other incentives, there isn't a huge amount of evidence that people will do that, unfortunately, whether you think that is the right thing or the wrong thing. yet there is strong evidence when you make things commercial, viable on supply chains, and scalable. So I think there's a role for both. But I think the engagement with the private sector around this question and with investors and with people who, yes, may get stinkingly rich out of growing these circular business models is an important part of a surefire way of scaling these things fast. But I think you can do these things together rather than instead of.
Great, thanks both. And Radia, I just want to bring you in for a final comment. If you want to comment on any of those questions that have just been asked, that would be very welcome. But also if you want to make any kind of final comment on your apprenticeship and how it may be, how you talk to people about it. Like I was wondering whether you talk to family and friends about it. How does it come across? Is it easy to explain? Is it different to what they know?
It's definitely not easy to explain, but the simplest way that I kind of say to people is that I'm part of a massive sustainability project. We aim to reduce waste by taking it up the waste hierarchy from recycle to reuse, which is even better. And I feel like that alone invites a lot of questions to which I can then break down. But that's what I say, really.
Amazing. I mean, even that in itself is a lesson for us in like how to deal with the narrative challenge around circular economy. Just talk about what it actually is in reality and people who are interested. Amazing. It has hit 1 o'clock. So I would just like to say thank you very much to all three of our panelists, Tom, Radia, and Michael. You've all been fascinating. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. And thank you to the audience for joining us today for this discussion. And we'll hopefully see you next time on another Green Alliance webinar. Thank you all very much.